आका आओ कि मुद्दत हुई है.
50th year, while Muhammad was meditating in a cave on the slopes of Mount Hira in the Meccan Valley, the angel Gabriel appeared to him with the first of God's messages, which were to be set down in the form of the Quran. One of the commands in the Holy Book was that believers in the faith should go at some time to Mecca, to the sacred temple built originally by God's friend and prophet Abraham. And so the pilgrimage, as Islam knows it, began, a response to the call of God, or Allah, as Arabs know him. For all pilgrims, the journey represents rebirth and continuity, the connecting threads of life like beads on a necklace linking past, present and future. Wherever in the world the Muslims' pilgrimage to Mecca begins, and no matter how difficult, it's the sacred duty of the faithful to attempt the journey once in a lifetime. Joachim Christian Wenzel, now Abdul Hafith, and his wife Kareba, formerly Catherine, will start from their home in a residential suburb of Dusseldorf, Germany, and with them will be the older two of their 4 young children. Each of the parents, he a German, she born in the north of England of Irish Roman Catholic stock, converted to Islam separately 10 years ago, before they met, married and had a family. Both of them had traveled widely in the East before embracing the Islamic faith.
One day I was asked, "Are you a Muslim?" And I couldn't say yes, and I couldn't say no. I was just in between. And that person, he saw my state, and he took me to a mosque, and people taught me the prayer. Since then, with the help of different teachers, I've been learning about Islam, studying about Islam, and I hope that I will be a better human being, more pleasing to my Lord and more useful to society for my faith.
I think never been so happy in my whole life as I have been since I've been a Muslim. Although one has troubles, one has ups and downs, still I have really gained inner peace through my conversion to Islam.
Abdul Hafith has made the Hajj, or pilgrimage to Mecca, before, and so has first-hand experience of its significance as a spiritual rebirth, thus strengthening his own faith. It's been difficult for him at times, having joined what is a religious minority in Europe whose faith is not generally understood in Western society. Abdul Hafith well remembers what happened when he first worked at this printing firm in Dusseldorf.
People were sort of looking me up and down saying, who's that, you know? Where does this guy come from? And they were surprised that I speak German as good as I do, and so on. When they realized I was a German, they were surprised, you know, to find a German being a Muslim.
His colleagues wanted to know why he changed his faith and why he dressed so differently. He told them that of all the religions he looked at, Islam offered him more peace of mind. For him, it was a faith in which God mattered most, not modern materialism and technology.
Now, talking to them, they realize that a lot of their questions that they have in their own lives are quite well answered in Islam. And, I mean, one person has actually become a Muslim in the factory since I've been working there. And there's quite a few who are interested, because, I mean, you find very few people who are actually happy with their lives Some of the people in the factory, they've asked me to stand for elections as a shop steward. And after some hesitation, I said, well, why not?
To be a Muslim woman in Germany is quite difficult. I have my scarf on and I'm taken for a Turk and have received firsthand the discrimination that a Turkish woman receives. The treatment, the rudeness, the impoliteness that they also receive. And I must admit that is very hard to bear here.
Kaufen wir erstmal Traube.
For Abdul Hafith and his wife, the stresses of life as Muslims in Western society hopefully will become easier as people around them learn a little about their faith. At the mosque Abdul Hafith attends in Dusseldorf, the imam has established over many years that politics should not be part of their religious lives. They are a community whose interests should be in unity and fellowship and improving themselves according to their faith. Worshippers at Friday prayers here are from a number of countries, parts of Africa, Morocco, Egypt. Abdul Hafith has spent the best part of a decade trying to understand the complexities of a faith into which his brothers here were born, its rites and rituals and holy commands to be obeyed without question.
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar.
In this small Muslim community, the fact that they're of different nationality matters not. Each and every one shares a common bond with his brother based on a belief that they're linked together by way of an eternal chain created by the Lord. Therefore, they are all part of the oneness of God. Connection with the past, continuity, and the unity of all things in creation are what Islam is all about. The Muslim brothers here have been encouraging Abdul Hafith to take his young family on the pilgrimage to Mecca at the earliest opportunity so that they might experience that continuity and spiritual rebirth which the journey to the holy city represents.
Actually, I went to the mosque and the imam at the Friday prayer, he was asking our Lord to support us to go on Hajj, and I was just saying Ameen, Ameen, you know. I had actually not much hope of going, but then I tried all the different steps. I tried to get my holiday from the company, and suddenly they said, yes, you can go. And I rang up my mother-in-law, can you take 2 of the kids? And she said, okay, fine. So everything worked out really easily for us. So then, of course, the children, or 2 of the children, will be in school next year, and it will be very difficult for my wife to go. And she really, I think, needed to go as well on Hajj, because it's always a turning point in one's life, as I've seen on other people who've been. So I thought, well, we have to get out of here, and we have to do this, and now is our chance. And the 2 bigger kids, it is risky taking them, but I think they've been on a number of journeys with us and they've done very well. They'll get through this one all right.
Before leaving for the pilgrimage, the family bear in mind some of the ground rules which must figure in their preparations. No Muslim must jeopardize the spiritual benefit of his journey by paying for it with funds acquired unlawfully, even by questionable means, nor must he leave behind any unpaid bills. They must also leave enough money for their dependents to be looked after while they're away. And finally, they must settle any disputes with neighbors or anyone else.
I felt quite scared. I also felt a kind of happy anticipation, because I felt it would be the most near meeting that I would have to Allah here on the earth.
They are now as ready as they ever will be for the great experience. The rest is in the hands of God. For most pilgrims arriving in Saudi Arabia for the Hajj, Jeddah is the gateway to the holy city of Mecca, some 45 miles east of here. Within a few days, well over 1 million pilgrims will pass through King Abdulaziz Airport at Jeddah for the biggest Muslim gathering anywhere on earth. There's been investment on a massive scale to cope with them all. It's a tribute to the Saudi authorities, even considering their experience at this modern terminal over the past 10 years, that this tremendous influx of the faithful runs so smoothly. Formalities are kept to a minimum. By sea as well as land, pilgrims arrive at the Islamic port of Jeddah, a great many of them having sailed from as far away as the Soviet Union, China, and various parts of the Far East. The government mobilizes all its resources, which are considerable, to ensure that health care and hygiene are given major priority. The government's budget for the pilgrimage is more than many countries have available to spend in a whole year. Health care for the pilgrims, which involves setting up special hospitals and emergency centres, costs £133 million. There are plans to extend this airport so that by the year 2000 it could handle 3 million people during the pilgrimage. More than £1,500 million has been set aside for building new roads to cater for the increasing number of pilgrims expected over the next few years. The vast majority of pilgrims go to the Hajj on public transport. Abdul Hafith and his family, having arrived in Jeddah by plane, rented a taxi for the first leg of their journey in Saudi Arabia. It's going to take them a couple of days to acclimatize themselves. The heat at this time of year is about 35 to 40 degrees. Abdul Hafith's family are making a detour in their car to the second of the holy cities, Medina, some 400 miles north of Jeddah. The journey across the barren Arabian hills is not an obligatory part of the pilgrimage, which has a rigid ritual for each stage to be followed without deviation. Medina, about 5 hours' drive from the holy city of Mecca, happens to be an important part of any Muslim's visit to Saudi Arabia because it's the city of the Prophet Muhammad. It's a haven of peace, a place of ancient mosques, a city revered by all Muslims.
Kaba Fusion is a pharmacist-owned, patient-focused team of professionals with over 30 years' experience providing intravenous medication to pediatric and adult patients in the comfort and safety of their own home. Founded by Dr. Sohail Masood, a pioneer in the home infusion industry and recipient of Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Award, Kaba Fusion has 28 state-of-the-art compounding pharmacies across the country with service capabilities nationwide. Specializing in IVIG, SCIG, and acute therapies, our highly skilled infusion nurses are present throughout your treatment and our clinicians are on call 24 hours a day. Please visit us at kabafusion.com for more information.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम नाज़रीन, आप मुझे देख रहे हैं पाकिस्तान से आगे में लेट्स टॉक रियल एस्टेट। मैं हूं आपका दोस्त होस्ट जमाल ख्वाजा। हर हफ्ते आपके लिए लाता हूं रियल एस्टेट की इंफॉर्मेशन। मैं 20 साल से रियल एस्टेट में हूं, आपके साथ मिलकर शेयर करना चाहता हूं अपने एक्सपीरियंस को। रियल एस्टेट मॉर्गेज पेमेंट्स, रियल एस्टेट परचेजिंग, रियल एस्टेट फ्लिपिंग, इन्वेस्टमेंट और आपके सवालात के जवाब के लिए हाजिर हूं। प्लीज देखते रहिए पाकिस्तान से आगे में लेट्स टॉक रियल एस्टेट।
शाहनवाज हलाल तंदूरी रेस्टोरेंट का एक और धमाका, खुला डुल्ला ओपन बारबेक्यू हर इतवार को पाइनएप्पल अवार्ड लिटिल इंडिया में जरूर जाइए। शाहनवाज का ओपन बारबेक्यू जूसी, मजेदार, चटखारेदार, जरूर जाइए और अपनी फैमिली को ले जाइए। ओपन बारबेक्यू एट शाहनवाज हलाल तंदूरी रेस्टोरेंट। मदाई मदा वैली में चाचा तंदूरी ने धूम मचा दी। लजीज तरीन मुगलई खानों का मरकज। पार्टी केटरिंग के लिए आज ही राब्ता करें। चाचा तंदूरी, लज़्ज़तों का महल।
It was here in Medina, we're told, that the Prophet and his companions found a welcome, rest and support in their battles against the unbelievers. For pilgrims who walk beneath the soaring minarets of the Prophet's sacred mosque, there's a feeling that the whole area is alive with goodness, faith and brotherhood. In the words of the Prophet, one prayer in my mosque is worth 1,000 in any other, excepting the holy mosque of Mecca. Because men pray separately in mosques, Abdul Hafith and his son visit the sacred shrine without the rest of the family. Abdul Hafith follows time-honored tradition and enters the mosque right foot first, young Muhammad trying to follow in his father's steps. As a European convert to Islam, he was made particularly welcome by other Muslim brothers who were born into the faith, to follow the rites and rituals of the pilgrimage without question. It is perhaps not an idea that appeals to the modern Westerner, but Muslims still see virtue in doing what they are commanded to do without demanding to know the reason. For Abdul Hafid's son, the visit to the mosque was the highlight of the journey so far. He'd been told about its religious importance and knew something of what to expect, but that's not quite the same as actually experiencing the event. It was the first time he'd been in the middle of such a large crowd of people. After completing his prayers, Abdul Hafid went on to visit the Prophet's tomb, which for everyone is an especially powerful moment.
And it was almost like an electric feeling throughout the body and entering into your heart, as if an unseen chain was there between my heart and the heart of the Prophet, peace be upon him, making me try or wish to follow his noble example in any possible aspect of life. The best thing that we can hope for is the mercy of our Lord and the intercession of his beloved Prophet, peace be upon him.
The family had to change to another vehicle because their limousine broke down, something which used to happen with monotonous regularity before Saudi Arabia acquired its oil money to build new roads. Back in the 1930s, when these pictures were taken, it was a very bumpy ride to the holy city of Mecca. Tarmac and air conditioning were unheard of, and many of the old vehicles, along with their passengers, were destined never to make it. And sometimes, if it wasn't sickness that stopped them, it was marauding bandits. Many of the camel trains in those days had been trekking for weeks in order to reach Mecca in time for the Hajj. Some who'd come from far distant lands had been in the saddle for months, or simply on foot during the hottest months of the Arabian calendar. Pilgrims today think of it as an endurance test, but half a century ago it was, for many, a life or death test of pure faith. If you were lucky, you might share a tent in which to shelter from the searing heat, and by the grace of God, you might finally arrive in one piece at the holiest of cities, Mecca, where the Prophet Muhammad was born, and which houses the great mosque and the Kaaba, the first house of God on earth, we're told, built originally by Abraham and his son Ishmael, known in the Quranic as Ibrahim and Ismail. Before entering the sacred territory all around Mecca, which they call the Haram, all men must discard the clothing they wear in the everyday world. It's one of a number of assignments, or mikats as they're known, to be performed at specific times and places. Women can carry out the rituals of the pilgrimage in respectable clothing of any color.
When one arrives at the miqat, one should make the intention to make the Hajj. At this point, A Muslim has to intend with as much sincerity in their heart as possible to perform the Hajj for Allah.
Men, on the other hand, must change into the timeless garment of the Hajj, 2 pieces of unsewn white cloth. Thus robed, no one from now on can tell whether the pilgrim is a king in the world, a millionaire, or a pauper. Abdul Hafith, like the Muslim brothers of 1,000 years ago, now enters a state of consecration, or ihram. He must declare his intention of performing the pilgrimage strictly according to Quranic rites and rituals. During this period, he may not adorn himself with any jewelry or other decoration, nor may he involve himself in any dispute or have sexual relations. Before moving with his family onto holy ground, he must recite the pilgrimage psalm, the Talbiyah, which will be constantly repeated at every occurrence along the way, as it has been since time immemorial. He's saying, "Here I am, O God, at thy command, here I am. Thou art without associates. Thine are praise and grace and dominion. Thou art without associates. Here I am." Having completed this important first act of dedication, Abdul Hafith meets purely by coincidence some other German converts he's known for a few years. In fact, he traveled to the Hajj with a few of them 2 years ago by bus. Apparently, it's no surprise to bump into old friends during the pilgrimage, despite the crowds. Later on, he met a Moroccan who works in the same company back in Germany. The Islamic community worldwide has grown considerably, many of them converts. Over 1/4 of the world's population is now Muslim, spanning for the most part the center line of the planet. It is very early on the first day of the pilgrimage, and the human flood into this hot desert town already seems endless. The multitude from all over the globe have come to Mecca in search of inner peace, a spiritual rebirth which Muslims believe is to be found here at the source of their faith. In a sense, all these people are returning home, being drawn as if by magnet to the center of their religion. Mecca is that sacred place to which Muslims should turn and pray 5 times a day, as the Prophet did. In the vast courtyard of the great temple stands the Kaaba, God's first mosque on earth. The circular movement the pilgrims are performing here is the Tawaf Qudum, the first of the rites which will dominate their lives for the next few days. Legend has it that the Kaaba was built by Adam, the first man, and later rebuilt by Abraham and his son Ishmael. The black canopy covering the Kaaba is finely embroidered in gold and silk thread, and every year it's replaced at a cost of £3 million. While more than 200 craftsmen set about making a new canopy, the old one is washed and cut into pieces to be sent as gifts to dignitaries all over the world. Weaving the new cloth on ancient hand looms takes most of the year. Each time, different verses from the Quran are embroidered in gold. These skills are handed down from generation to generation. The finished masterpiece weighs 2,000 kilograms. The pilgrims move on after their first day in Mecca to the bare plains of Arafat, roughly taking the route, we're told, the Prophet took on his farewell pilgrimage. It's about 10 miles from the holy city to Arafat.
First we go down this way and then we come back. I think it's no problem.
I had a funny experience last night with the Quran, by the way.
But Abdul Hafith, having arrived at Arafat with his family, has to take some important decisions for their safety and comfort.
Yes. This day is the most important day, you know, day of Arafat. The Prophet said, whoever catches Arafat, he has caught the Hajj. So, this is the day.
His wife Kareba is going to shelter in a tent for a while with the children while they rest and say their prayers.
I can feel anything if we're inside the tents.
Yeah, but we're going to Jabal Rahman.
The pilgrims move on to say their midday and afternoon prayers in the Nimra Mosque at Arafat. No one wants to miss coming to Arafat for fear of nullifying the other rites and all the effort they've made so far. Like many thousands of others, Abdul Hafid sets out for the mosque on foot. He'll collect his family later on for the next stage of the pilgrimage. Many people think of the pilgrimage primarily as a journey to Mecca, but to Muslims there is no better day in God's sight than the day of Arafat. It's laid down in the Quran that God has called them to this barren place in the desert to ask his forgiveness for their sins.
Kaaba Fusion is a pharmacist-owned, patient-focused team of professionals with over 30 years' experience providing intravenous medication to pediatric and adult patients in the comfort and safety of their own home. Founded by Dr. Sohail Masood, a pioneer in the home infusion industry and recipient of Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Award, Kaaba Fusion has 28 state-of-the-art compounding pharmacies across the country with service capabilities nationwide. Specializing in IVIG, SCIG, and acute therapies, our highly skilled infusion nurses are present throughout your treatment and our clinicians are on call 24 hours a day. Please visit us at kaabafusion.com for more information.
शाहनवाज हलाल तंदूरी रेस्टोरेंट का एक और धमाका, खुला डुल्ला ओपन बारबेक्यू हर इतवार को पाइनएप्पल अवार्ड लिटिल इंडिया में जरूर जाइए। शाहनवाज का ओपन बारबेक्यू जूसी, मजेदार, चटखारेदार, जरूर जाइए और अपनी फैमिली को भी ले जाइए। ओपन बारबेक्यू एट शाहनवाज हलाल तंदूरी रेस्टोरेंट। मदाई मदा वैली में चाचा तंदूरी ने धूम मचा दी। लजीज तरीन मुगलई खानों का मरकज। पार्टी केटरिंग के लिए आज ही राब्ता करें। चाचा तंदूरी लज़्ज़तों का महल।
मेरे आका आओ के मुद्दत हुई है।
Normally, this This arid tract of land is virtually empty of people. But it's such a sacred place to Muslims during the Hajj, they say the only real presence here is the presence of God. This rallying of men, women and children, regardless of nationality, race or social status, symbolizes the importance Islam attaches to the equality of all human beings in the eyes of the Lord.
لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك والملك لا شريك لك خذ يا عم المنطق لبيك اللهم لبيك لا يا عم تزعل لا لا
Just before the pilgrimage, the plain of Arafat has been transformed into a city under canvas, stretched out like a white quilt to the mountains. When the Hajj is over, they will all vanish just as quickly as they came, the desert reclaiming the land. The prayers here at midday and in the afternoon are attended by so many people there's not enough room inside the mosque. So the pilgrims occupy space wherever they can find it. After prayers here, the more vigorous pilgrims will make their way to the point which gives all Muslims a powerful sense of their faith, the Mount of Mercy. Abdul Hafith and his wife had thought this uphill climb in the heat would have been too much for the children. It was here, on this mountain some 200 feet high, that the Prophet Muhammad preached his last sermon in 632 of the Christian era. This is known as the wuguf, or the standing on Arafat, and indeed many will stand with their hands outstretched in prayer, though no one is obliged to do so. It's a time for deep meditation. It's a time when pilgrims believe they stand before their Creator. It is, as it were, the apocalypse. It's time again to move to the next ritual at Muzdalifah, where they will collect stones with which to cast out the forces of evil.
For the first day, 1, 2, 3. Yes. 4, 5, 6.
How many pebbles pilgrims collect depends on how long they intend to stay at Mina, the next stopping place where they'll carry out the stoning.
Yes.
It's very late now on the day of Arafat. The pilgrims are very weary, having been on the go for more than 20 hours.
Yeah, okay. I'm really tired. We should have a rest and then we should, after Fajr, quickly get, try to get there.
After Fajr prayer.
Okay.
Mina is a tiny and normally uncrowded town tucked between two ranges of rocky mountains, but they've had to build some enormous walkways to cope with the human deluge during the Hajj. In the center of Mina, there are 3 large pillars. They represent Satan and lesser devils who are said to have tempted Abraham on this very site to disobey God's order to sacrifice his son, Ishmael. Abraham gathered a handful of pebbles and cast 7 of them at the face of the tempter, who promptly ran away. In effect, by throwing their stones at each of the pillars, the pilgrims believe they're also preparing themselves against temptation when they resume their everyday lives. The sacrifice of lambs, which follows, is part of Islam's great feast of Eid. It symbolizes Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son. In the past, the sacrificed meat that wasn't eaten had to be thrown away. These days, the carcasses are kept in vast refrigerated warehouses before being sent to needy Muslims in various parts of the world. It's an act which, as with the animals, is done in memory of Abraham's sacrifice of a ram in place of his son Ishmael, and a reminder of the divine mercy that made that substitution possible. The pilgrim is approaching the moment now when he can begin to relax a little after his long day. Now the pilgrims are no longer required to be in a state of consecration. They can wash and change into brighter clothes. There's usually a big rush for the avenues of phone boxes the Saudi government lays on, so the pilgrims can phone relatives or friends to say they're about to celebrate the feast of Eid. And that means about 5 million calls in one day. Now the final rituals in Mecca. The human tide moving as if magnetized by Mecca's holy shrine. And in the middle of it, the Kaaba, the physical center point of the Islamic faith. An ancient tradition tells us that Adam, the first man and the first prophet, was commanded by the Lord to come to this spot and build for him a house. Then Adam was told to move around it, as he'd seen the angels encircling God's throne. The Lord alone knows the truth of the story, but it explains the ritual being carried out here by the believers. The Muslim believes in one God. The same God is acknowledged by Judaism and Christianity. And the Prophet Muhammad, born here in Mecca, was the last of the messengers chosen for mankind's guidance. Therefore, his revelations, as set down in the Quran, are the words of God, unaltered and unalterable. And so Muslims believe these rites and rituals of the pilgrimage are by divine command. Whatever their race or nationality, those who come here for spiritual rebirth are one in the same brotherhood.
The Hajj puts life into perspective for me. I feel that I'm nothing, that I'm a drop in the sea of humanity, that I'm an atom in the creation of this universe. The good attributes, good sides, like patience, humility, I hope have increased a little bit.
Whether a person enters the community of Islam by choice, like Abdul Hafith, or by birth, there is an obligation to conform to the 5 pillars of the religion, which are the confession of faith, the 5 daily prayers, the payment of alms to the poor, the fast of Ramadan, and the pilgrimage to Mecca by those physically fit enough and financially able to undertake it. With the faithful of these days coming from so many different cultures, the pilgrimage serves as a reminder that Islam is a world religion, and whatever may be the appearances in some Middle Eastern countries, there is no ecclesiastical hierarchy in Islam, no ultimate doctrinal authority other than the Quran. The pilgrimage represents continuity between past, present, and future. And pilgrims need to go back in time to understand what life was like here in ages past.
The sight of the desert is breathtaking in a way. I just feel I'm on the surface of a planet. It's very barren and almost hostile. I wonder how people can live here, how people travel through these deserts without roads as we have them today. How would they find their way? How would they stand the heat? Or how weak have we become if we think how they must have lived with a few dates and a bit of water?
Long before the town of Mecca sprang up, when there was nothing here but empty hills and desert, tradition has it that here Abraham was commanded by God to abandon his wife Hajar and their son Ishmael. The water he left with them soon ran out. A terrible thirst was upon them, and Hajar ran to and fro, calling on God's mercy. The angel Gabriel then appeared, we're told, and struck the ground with his wing. A stream of water gushed forth over the sand, and it became a well. The Well of Zamzam, as it's called, is beneath the Holy Mosque, a natural spring that goes on producing the life fluid as it has done since time immemorial. It's regarded as holy water, the purest water on earth, we're told, which millions of pilgrims have used not just to quench the thirst, but as part of the inner cleansing process.
This is the water of the Well of Zamzam, from which millions and millions and billions of Muslims have drunk.
The symbol of God's light, the Star of Mecca, overlooks the area within the domed mosque where Abraham's wife Hajar ran in search of water. She rushed, it said, 7 times between 2 hills about half a mile apart. Here, the pilgrims follow in her footsteps, experiencing something of her anguish out in the desert. Today, the distance run and the ritual, which is known as the Sai, is enclosed along one side of the sacred shrine. Abdul Hafith, like all other men, must run between the 2 fixed points. His wife and the children can walk.
بالك يا أخي سعيد.
All the rites and rituals of the Hajj are over now. It's time for the pilgrims to carry back home with them the spiritual reawakening this journey represents. Before final departure, there's the opportunity to step into the reality of modern Mecca, the hustle and bustle of the souk, where there's a little something for everyone. For our family from Germany, it's been the richest of life's experiences. And as Europeans, they felt they were accepted by those Muslims they met who were born into the faith.
They loved the children. The other pilgrims found them beautiful and lovely. They were very astonished to see such small blonde children there, but they reacted very nicely to the children, and they called them Hajj Muhammad and Hajj Naima with great respect.
No one here is in a rush to get away, and even if you were, you couldn't. The exodus from Mecca is a slow process. In the past, there have been accidents during the pilgrimage, there have been tragedies, the loss of lives, but none of it can be blamed on the pilgrimage itself. Islam is a world of turbulent emotions, conditioned by the course of history in this region. All the pilgrimage can do is to make it possible for Muslims, wherever they live in the world, to come here in the hope of finding spiritual peace. Here, for a few days, they have all been guests of God.
मेरे आका आओ के मुद्दत हुई है।
Kaba Fusion is a pharmacist-owned, patient-focused team of professionals with over 30 years' experience providing intravenous medication to pediatric and adult patients in the comfort and safety of their own home. Founded by Dr. Sohail Masood, a pioneer in the home infusion industry and recipient of Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Award, Kaba Fusion has 28 state-of-the-art compounding pharmacies across the country with service capabilities nationwide. Specializing in IVIG, SCIG, and acute therapies, our highly skilled infusion nurses are present throughout your treatment, and our clinicians are on call 24 hours a day. Please visit us at kabafusion.com for more information.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम नाजरीन, आप मुझे देख रहे हैं पाकिस्तान से आगे में लेट्स टॉक रियल स्टेट। मैं हूं आपका दोस्त होस्ट जमाल ख्वाजा। हर हफ्ते आपके लिए लाता हूं रियल स्टेट की इंफॉर्मेशन। मैं 20 साल से रियल स्टेट में हूं, आपके साथ मिलकर शेयर करना चाहता हूं अपने एक्सपीरियंस को। रियल स्टेट मॉर्गेज पेमेंट्स, रियल स्टेट परचेजिंग, रियल स्टेट फ्लिपिंग, इन्वेस्टमेंट और आपके सवालात के जवाब के लिए हाजिर हूं। प्लीज देखते रहिए पाकिस्तान से आगे में लेट्स टॉक रियल स्टेट।
शाहनवाज शाहनवाज हलाल तंदूरी रेस्टोरेंट का एक और धमाका, खुला डुल्ला ओपन बारबेक्यू हर इतवार को पाइनेबल अवार्ड लिटिल इंडिया में जरूर जाइए। शाहनवाज का ओपन बारबेक्यू जूसी, मजेदार, चटखारेदार, जरूर जाइए और अपनी फैमिली को भी ले जाइए। ओपन बारबेक्यू एट शाहनवाज हलाल तंदूरी रेस्टोरेंट। मदाई मदा वैली में चाचा तंदूरी ने धूम मचा दी। लजीज तरीन मुगलई खानों का मरकज। पार्टी केटरिंग के लिए आज ही राब्ता करें। चाचा तंदूरी, लज़्ज़तों का महल।
मेरे आका